It's the Kink Consultant Podcast, where we're turning up the heat on all things kink and dating, relationships, and pop culture. So close the door, plug in your headphones, and let's get down to it. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Kink Consultant Podcast. I have a very special guest this week. We have Lauren LaRusso, a therapist who specializes in infidelity for individuals and couples. And when I came across her Instagram account, I was so impressed with the work she's doing, the taboo topic she's talking about, and I felt a real kinship being online and talking about things that can be such a hot button issue. So welcome, Lauren. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I couldn't agree more with that hot button topic.
Yeah, and I think more people than you'd ever think have been touched by cheating, whether they are cheated on, the person cheating, partly because I think it's not being talked about. Let's start there, though. What do you define cheating as?
Any kind of emotional, physical, or combined type betrayal of the pieces of a relationship that belong exclusively to that couple. And they are brought outside of the relationship without the awareness of one of the members of the partnership.
It's kind of a broad topic then, right?
It's in the eye of the beholder in many ways.
It really is in the eye of the beholder. Honestly, you could talk about what's considered kink and say the exact same thing of it is in the eye of the beholder. You and I actually are no strangers to cheating. I think we've both had partners who cheated on us. And I think that's what makes it interesting too, because you're not talking about this from like a pedestal where you're looking around and just saying, I know how to help people through these situations. You've actually been through it yourself. Was that what kicked off this work for you?
Definitely. And I think there's an amount of compassion, empathy, humility that when you bring that to the work as a professional, because you've walked that walk and you've walked through that fire and come out the other side, that's so invaluable to people who are feeling very alone and very isolated, which is how these things occur. And when you're speaking out about those things, not only from your own experience, but from a professional level, where you can offer insight, education, normalize certain things, that's transformative to people. So for me, I would have said I was living that white picket fence 2.5 kids life until it absolutely was blown apart by infidelity and my marriage ended. I have one child. It wasn't the family unit that I had been planning on, that I had been building towards. And it really pivoted my life from that moment. So I was already a therapist. I was in private practice. That was going great. And then this thing happened. And ultimately, I had to dive into my own healing. I mean, you cannot healthfully help people when you are still in the throes of your own pain and disorientation. So this topic was not something I touched until about 4 years later, when I had gone through many rounds of grief, change, trauma healing, trauma work, understanding, and really just basically metabolizing my experience and creating and stabilizing my life anew. Then I felt like this tension between myself and the experience I'd gone through and the greater world, and knowing that I had to start to speak out and do something on a wider scale about it, because I knew I wasn't the only one by a long shot. But why aren't we talking about it as much as it happens? It's a real problem.
When I really started to dig into the numbers, I'm like, how are we all staying so quiet on this?
We don't like to talk about our ugly parts, our vulnerable parts, our shameful experiences, the pains that we've endured in our life, as much as we like to show and celebrate the parts of us that keep us safe. So it's really a safety thing. We want to protect ourselves, our bonds. So we tend to self-protect around things that we don't trust ourselves to understand. We don't trust the world to handle and understand well. And I really think it's this self-fulfilling cycle with infidelity, cheating, betrayal in relationships. It is so much more common and super common to couples who stay together. We see these relationships, marriages, 30, 40, 50 years. Tell me there wasn't betrayal at some point by one or both parties in some way. Maybe I'm jaded by the work that I do, but it's a long time to stay together and never have to go through something significant that shakes everything up and causes you to have to deal with some crisis in the relationship. So we don't talk about it. We look at people, we put them on those pedestals, we celebrate the anniversaries, and then we feel like if and when that happens to us, we've failed. We've singularly done something wrong or bad or we are unlovable or imperfect as people or partners. But the truth is, it is happening out there, and people are just keeping it within the confines of their little homes privately, because social media is a perfect example. Is we don't like to show the parts of ourselves that we're not proud of, that feel like failures. And I would say that betrayal in a relationship feels like a failure. It's not a failure. It's a crisis and an experience that you need to get through, grow from, figure out what to do about. It's a tremendous heartbreak, but it's not a singular failure by any means. But I think we see it as that, and we really self-protect around it as a culture, society, and individuals.
Thank you for all of that. I don't go online and talk about this, even though I'm quite open about other parts of my life. I think flipping this on its head a little bit, the person who cheats, if you talk about cheating online at all, I've even experienced this, just saying my personal opinion is that sometimes people have reasons that they cheat. And I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, because this is even hard for me to say because I know the backlash that comes from saying this. I work with a lot of people who cheat because people want to explore kink outside of their relationship. Either they're too afraid to bring it up, or they're sorry, I didn't realize how triggering this conversation was going to be for me. I am sorry.
Don't be sorry. Maybe that's a good thing.
As you spoke, I just realized how much pain I went through as the cheated on partner that I really just brushed over and blamed myself for in many ways.
Take a second. And Amanda, I just want to say that one thing that also isn't talked about is the fact that pain, it doesn't ever go away. And people want to use the word like get over it. Like, when will I heal? When will I get over it? The answer is never. I do this work every day. I'm a therapist. I wrote a book on the topic that's coming out next year. And still, if I say one thing out of nowhere, I will get incredibly emotional because I'm still heartbroken deep, deep down inside. And I'm still traumatized, or I'm still affected by the way that it's changed my life. So don't be sorry for those emotions. I've cried on conversations with my book editor, just retelling her a part I was writing. It's part of being human. So I actually think
Thank you.
It's a good thing to show.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think what really came up is that on some internal level, I think I blame myself for the cheating that happened because I'm kinky, my partner is not. And I feel like he just felt like he couldn't satisfy me. And then he went somewhere else where he did feel like he was satisfying the person. So it's a very complex.
That's self-blame.
Yeah, it's quite a complex issue. What's really interesting, though, is as soon as you mention your partner cheated, if you do say it out loud, everyone gets so angry at the cheater and they condemn them. And I have a lot of empathy for both sides, even having been cheated on. And you don't just deal with one side, you help both of them work through what's happened.
I help all parties in an affair.
Yeah.
So I help the affair partner, I help the betrayed, and I help the person who's being unfaithful, in addition to affair couples and married couples. So my take is that everyone deserves and requires healing. How do we heal the whole if we only heal one part of it? We don't. We have to let everyone involved and affected know that they're not alone, that you don't have to sit in shame and silence, and that there is a space where you can process it safely, get support, get insight, get information, and you don't have to stay stuck and isolated. But again, that shame piece, we want to blame one person because it keeps us safe. But having empathy, that's a superpower, right? Like, if you want to sit in an ivory tower and say that only the person who steps out of the relationship is to blame, then there's some deep work ahead of you. Let me be clear. The person who's responsible for the infidelity is the person who stepped out of the relationship, period, end of sentence. And I never want to confuse that. But to have empathy is to understand that they're human too, just as we are human. And empathy and insight is not excuse. They're not the same thing.
There are certain misconceptions, or maybe these are true. This is one that I hear a lot. Like, oh, if someone cheats, the relationship wasn't right in the first place. It wasn't good. But that's in direct opposition of these couples who last for 50 years.
That's not fair. And again, that's part of that unilateral cultural assignment that we make. We as humans want to tell stories so that we can fit things into neat spaces that make sense to us so we can feel more safe and in control of our experience. So when we hear things like, that's what that is. It's let me attach myself to one explanation of something that's extraordinarily complex. Again, no excuse, but extraordinarily complex and individual for each couple and person. So no, listen, relationships are complex. So if we're saying that the relationship is not meant to be, some relationships aren't, but some relationships are as good as any will ever get, and there's still infidelity or betrayal. That's because we're also individuals with agency, and we don't live in a glass bubble. We experience other people. We experience ourselves through the eyes of other people. We experience ourselves as part of the greater world. And that can be a life force in and of its own, where you are pulled out of the relationship, not pushed out of the relationship by the relationship being bad by any means.
Hey, Kinksters, if you've ever held back from sharing your desires because you were afraid of being judged or shut down, this is for you. I'm hosting a live 1-hour workshop called How to Tell Your Partner Your Kink on Wednesday, December 3rd at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You'll learn to communicate your desires with confidence and clarity so you can feel seen and connected instead of anxious or misunderstood. It's just $26, includes a workbook, and it's happening live on Zoom so I can answer all of your questions in real time. Join me and learn how to express what turns you on in a way that builds trust and intimacy. RSVP at amandadames.com or use the link in the show notes. Oh my gosh, you put that so well, and I think that it sounds like that is the experience of so many, just being pulled out by the world we live in, because our energies mix, we meet other people, things happen, and that's living, that is life. Are there commonalities though? Is there in your work this like number one reason that people cheat? Do you see reoccurring themes throughout like most of your clients?
There are some people who will have that distilled list, and I really don't. And there are big themes, like, for example, having an avoidant type relational style. That is going to be a big vulnerability to infidelity, because the difference between the person in the relationship who goes to the mat when they're having disconnection or unhappiness or an unmet need or desire, when they turn towards the relationship, that's going to be a huge strengthening factor of that relationship, a huge protective factor of that relationship. When you're avoidant, which many people are, we grow up conflict avoidant, we grow up learning that we cannot speak our needs, our desires, our wants, our feelings, that we can't. And we're terrified to. We're terrified of that experience, whether it's because our partner gets defensive, which is normal, or extra defensive, which is maybe not a great thing, or because there's conflict, or because it just makes somebody else have to experience us more honestly. There's a million reasons for that avoidance, but avoidant people in relationships are so much more likely to silently and unilaterally just go out of the relationship to handle their issues instead of towards the relationship. That's a huge thing. So there's avoidance as a personality style, a relational style, an attachment style. It takes a lot of different shapes. And then there's narcissism, personality disorders. That's a huge one. There's almost nobody with narcissistic personality style or a high conflict personality style that isn't going to find fault with their partner enough to justify getting their needs met somewhere else. And they will never get enough from their partner because they can never get enough really from anybody. Those are some big ones, but there's a million different reasons. And that's why doing the individual work is so important.
Yeah, and all of those are really great points. I want to touch on something you said about not just the avoidance, but this idea that a partner's never going to really accept the honest version of themselves. You said a variation of that. And I think that stuck out to me because so much of what happens in the kink world is we, and I can speak for myself as well, will have a kink and feel a lot of fear that I won't be accepted once I bring it up. So sometimes I will hide it for a really long time. In the past, not anymore. I will hide my kinks and just bring it up like months into the relationship when other parts were established enough. And there was a fear of rejection for that entire time until I brought it up. And that's one of the things that is common in the work I do. People who are so afraid to bring up what they want, or they've been rejected once by their partner. So instead of going to the mat, like you just described, sometimes it feels easier. And one of our justifications, and I'm not saying this is narcissism, is, oh, they don't want this anyway. and I want the relationship, but they don't want to do this with me. So it's okay that I'm doing it with someone else. It's not like
Yeah.
sex where they want sex. They don't want to spank me. I use that example because
Mhm.
I like to be spanked. So like, let me go somewhere else to find that. Have you worked with any couples who have kink as one of the reasons they leave to cheat?
Oh, time and again. And again, it's on this spectrum, right? So I'm
Mm.
not a kink expert by any means, but it's on a spectrum. And really, it comes back to that rejection piece. Either I don't want to be rejected by my partner or my spouse, so I'm not even going to bring this here. Or there was one time when I said, spank me, and they said, ew, what? I'm not going to do that. And immediately I felt filled with shame. And I shut down and I never said it again. And then I brought it somewhere else. We are more emotionally fragile than we want to ever acknowledge and admit to ourselves, and rightfully so. Why is there a whole world of vulnerability research that got so huge in the past decade or two? Because being vulnerable is so scary, and we certainly struggle to be most vulnerable in the places where we have the most intimacy, our marriage and our lasting partnerships. So that rejection piece is huge. And I really appreciate how you isolated this one piece where someone actually thinks that they're like protecting their relationship or saving their partner or their spouse from having to even be uncomfortable by going and getting their needs met somewhere else. There's this backwards inverted logic where it's, I just don't bother them with this thing that I know they don't want, then I'm actually stabilizing my relationship.
That is something I do hear a lot. And it's tough because I understand on a very core desire level of like how deeply it's needed from
Mm.
what I want. But with vulnerability, in order to be vulnerable, you need to create a safe space where you feel comfortable enough. Is that some of the work you do, helping couples get back to a repair stage, creating that safety to open up?
Yeah, I do. And frankly, I work probably more with unfaithful spouses than any other demographic. The couples work, when you're dealing with infidelity, now you've created a whole other problem. And so the infidelity itself becomes the greatest issue. You can't even touch those other issues, like getting your sexual desires explored or growing. You're not growing and building anything in the relationship when you've had a crisis that tears everything down. You're really in triage mode. So my work is a lot of that triage mode. But what I definitely do is I encourage honesty. I think that honesty is the antidote to any relationship. That's the fastest way to find out if someone's going to meet you where you need to be met or whether they can't or they won't. But if we're not honest, we will never find out. We will make a decision inside of ourselves before we will ever have the opportunity to find out from the other person. So there's no safeguard against infidelity, but I think if you can start practicing honesty in your relationship, that's where the good stuff happens. Now, you have to be safe and honest. You have to be a safe person to be honest with, and you have to be safely honest with the other person. Let's say you're having a conversation about sexual desire. Don't shame your partner. That's unsafe
Yeah.
communication. But to say like, babe, that's not my thing. And like, I hate to say that because I wish I could be freaky in that way, but I'm like finding myself a little like shut down around it. I'm a little embarrassed around it. Don't shame them. Just own what's coming up for you. And then you can say, so how do we work with that? Is that something you need? Or is that something we can shelve or come back to later or not do and you'll be okay with? And having those kind of conversations, that's a negotiation. And partnerships are negotiation. So we're not taught these things. We're not taught that relationships are supposed to be a negotiation of needs and wants. So instead we do things like, oh, how could you want that? And then the rest is history.
You're so spot on. We are not taught these things. In fact, we are taught the exact opposite. I am supposed to find my Prince Charming, and he's supposed to step into my life and know everything I want naturally, and we're going to live happily ever after. So I'll sit here in my ivory tower waiting for him to crawl up. That is the story we're told, and I think so many of us still hold on to it. So when something like this happens, or when we do feel kinky and we're afraid, it just feels, oh, this is wrong. It's not the right thing for me just because this one piece doesn't match up.
Yes.
And I think that's really relatable to a lot of people and how we end up in situations, not just infidelity, not just being cheated on or cheating, just being kinky and being scared to bring it up. It's that embarrassment of who we are that might not be accepted. That's not the storybook ending.
The parts of ourselves that we've learned aren't invited to the table. we tend to banish, and then they come up because they will.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we don't know what to do with them, and we can't bring them in. And I deal with this a lot, and I'm curious to see if this comes up in your work, where someone enters a relationship almost dishonestly from the beginning. And I think you alluded to this as like you bring it up later,
Yes.
but they get married under this guise of not having any desires, not seen as on the fringe or any needs or wants, but they keep those a secret. And then 5, 10, 15 years later, when they have an affair or they've been seeing a mistress or getting their needs met, their sexual desires met somewhere else, and it's found out, they say, I wasn't honest with you from the beginning. It's not your fault because I didn't even show you this part of myself. And that's huge because it feels like this betrayal of I married someone that I thought I knew, but I was never going to know you because you always hid that part of yourself.
Oh, yeah. So it's 50-50. For some people, they just realize later in life, they're 50 plus years old, married in their 20s, and just never even thought they took their role that society told them, like, you're the man, you go get the job, and you provide for your family, never thought about their own needs in any other way. And then their wife might even be open to it, but it's not something then they felt comfortable bringing up. But then, yeah, I think I'm going to own up to that. I am divorced. I was married. And what I did was I pretended it wasn't that big of a need. But I was also telling myself that. I was like, I don't need this. But yeah, it happens that way. And then you're not your full self coming into partnership because
Right.
you're
And
not accepting yourself too.
exactly. And I think most of us are walking around in that state, myself included. It's what it is to be human. How can we know ourselves fully? That's impossible. How can we live into all of our parts of ourselves immediately? We change, we grow, we evolve, we experience ourselves differently. Our needs and desires change and evolve. And that's shaky ground for a relationship. We're either going to grow and negotiate this thing together or we're not. And that's where I meet people ultimately. But I also want to say that a lot of times people think they have expressed themselves as well, but really it was once, or really it was like a whisper, or really, right? And they're like, well, then that one time, so I just decided forever. And then the affair is discovered, or the kink is revealed, or whatever. And it's like, I told you that I wanted that once, like 10 years ago, and I didn't realize it was that big of a deal. So I said no, and I thought we moved on. Be louder, be
Yes.
more insistent with your desires. Be more honest, be more open, be more vulnerable, because ultimately it's going to catch up with you. So a whisper is not enough. A complaint is not a request. All of these things we're not taught really catch up with us in the end.
Like that, honestly, as you were saying this, yes, this is where the honesty piece plugs in perfectly. We're growing as people. We don't know every part of ourselves. So if you practice honesty continuously, when these new parts come up, the feelings or desires surge within you. If you've already been practicing honesty, it's a natural conversation. And to your point, please do not hint at your kinks. Please do not mention them once. You have to come to the table and truly express yourself, explain how important it is to you, because that's giving your partner the full picture. If they understand this is something, any serious conversation, you're going to sit down and have a serious discussion. If this is a need you have that you haven't previously disclosed, bringing that level of seriousness and weight to the discussion is important. So I'm glad you
You
said
have
that.
to risk the
Yeah.
relationship because you're going to end up risking it in more devastating ways. And I think we don't want to take that risk. We want to stay safe, and then ultimately it's going to come back to you later.
That is exactly it. Thank you for saying that, Lauren. It is exactly that. I think some of us are so risk averse that we don't even realize what we're risking by being risk averse. And I think,
Well said. Well
yeah,
said.
love that.
We'd
And
rather
then,
take the risk in private too,
oh, yes.
right? To take
Yeah.
a risk with someone who knows us and could reject us or judge us or shame us or know us more fully and then not like it. That is the scariest risk, to be vulnerable in our closest places. That's what people struggle with. And that's what leads to a lot of infidelity, I guess. Also, to come full circle to that earlier question, is being vulnerable, being real, being honest, being loud and persistent about what's non-negotiable for you, what's so important to you. That is so important. It is so essential in having a relationship that's what everyone really wants, which is to be themselves and to be loved and known by another person. And that's all any of us really crave, is to be known and loved for exactly who we are. But then we don't let other people even know us because sometimes we're afraid to even know ourselves.
That is okay. So that might be at the core of it. And I think that is something, even if infidelity isn't something that we're considering, that hurt and pain and fear, I believe is universal, even for the securely attached type of person. That fear exists, right?
Yes. Oh
Yeah.
my God. And to the point of we're never all healed and all that stuff, I have done so much work on myself. And I would say I am very securely attached. And the idea of my partner leaving me will flatline me until I gather myself again and go, if that ever happens, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. You've done this before. Nothing is forever. That could happen. But the visceral fear we carry inside of abandonment, we're born with that. And so we're taught that to be abandoned or left by the people that we are bonded to, that's death. That feels like a living death. So it's enough to bring anybody to their knees, and it does. And so there's none of us high and mighty and walking around, oh, I just teach other people to do this. I don't have these feelings. I'm sort of like you getting emotional at the beginning of this podcast.
Yeah.
Or me, literally, if I don't hear from my partner on an evening, we don't live together, I find myself going to that place that I went to 8 years ago in my marriage where I was being lied to and gaslit. He's not doing any of that. But I'm human, and that stuff lives inside of me, and I have to work through that. But the fear of abandonment and the fear of being hurt and rejected and shown that mirror that we're not good enough, oh God, I can't think of anything much more painful than that.
No, it's so painful. And you say being shown a mirror, but I'm realizing when you said those words, I carry that fear as well of what if another person, I'm not in another relationship yet, but it's if I'm left again, my immediate fear is then everyone is going to know I'm not worthy because everyone's going to think it's my fault that people keep leaving. And it's such an internalized fear of, oh, other people are going to judge me and think it's my fault. It's almost to the point that I've internalized that it is my fault. The fear is other people seeing it, right?
I was just going to say that. Really deep down inside, we fear we're unworthy. So if it happens again, that's just a reinforcement of our deepest seated fear that really we're leavable. Like everyone else deserves a relationship and fidelity and love, and we somehow are unfit or unchosen for that, and we're going to be left. And for other people to know that too, it's just salt in the wound. But really, it's a deep fear we're carrying around.
But to your point, flatlining and just realizing also, I have survived this already. Like, it wouldn't be pleasant to survive it again, but I have that strength within me too, as do many of us, all of us even.
Yeah.
I know it's all individual work, but do you have advice for people? Say there are listeners here who are currently exploring kink outside of a marriage. It's infidelity. It's that betrayal of their partner doesn't know. Is there a specific place you tell them to start? Or if they want to get out of that situation, what options are available to them?
Honesty. So I don't mean full honesty,
Okay.
but my work with someone like that is begin in 1 degree increments to bring yourself into your relationship at home. Because I guarantee you that's going to begin slowly to allow you to meet the very things that you're afraid of meeting, that you're running from through what you're doing. And that's what's going to happen anyway, but in a catastrophic dumpster fire, car crash, disaster, if and when what you're doing over here is discovered. So why don't we just work backwards from the outcome and let's begin to be more honest at home. Let's begin to have the conversations that we're not having because we're doing it over here. Let's begin to explore and gently challenge the homeostasis of our relationship, because what you will find is what would happen anyway. But our spouse, our partner deserves to know what they're up against or dealing with, or to opt in or opt out, or even have those conversations. But 9.99% of the time, those conversations are not being had. They're just being determined by the person who stepped out that they don't belong at home. So what happens is that when the thing, let's say it's kink that someone's exploring outside of their marriage, when that thing is discovered, that's when you know what your relationship really is. The spouse is either going to go to the mat, the betrayed spouse, or not. But also, most of the time, they go to the mat for the relationship. So let's start inviting that process so that we allow the unknowing spouse to opt into their relationship proactively instead of reactively.
I just need a second for that because you are so right about it that for so many people, part of the excitement of, oh, this new person is discovering me and learning so much about me, but you do have the opportunity to let your spouse learn this new part of you too. I know you're the expert, but in my experience with kink specifically, is bring a lot of patience to that too. To your point, you don't just whisper it, you don't just say it once, you make it a serious thing. It's so easy to just think, oh, they rejected me. This is why I'm having an affair. This is why I'm exploring it elsewhere. We need to bring patience to that conversation because one conversation, especially with kink, it's a complex topic. And I'm sure there are so many complex topics, but one conversation probably isn't going to do it. And it's going to require patience. That 1%.
That's why I said
and, you know, 1 degree, 1 degree.
1 degree at a time. And don't be so fragile about it. And if you are, which many people are, there's shame work to be done there. There's shame work to be done for all of us, but be doing your own work. There's a lot of resources out there to help you gain the courage to be more vulnerable in conversation, in relationships, because again, these are things that we were not modeled nor taught. And we need to learn them as adults now. We're not little anymore, and we don't have to act in those adaptive ways, but we do have to hold ourselves accountable to be courageous in our relationships. And sometimes it takes the discovery to shock everybody out of their complacency as well. So sometimes it's 1%, 1 degree, 1%, those little shifts, but ultimately the wake-up call, it's not happening because it's not enough to shake somebody into realizing that their relationship is really in crisis. That's where sometimes I do encourage people to say, our relationship is in crisis. I'm not okay here. We need to front load those conversations a lot more often because we're not okay. We're having an affair. We're sleeping with someone else. We're exploring our kink. We're being more honest in the dishonest relationship than we're being at home. Our spouse deserves to know that the relationship is in crisis so they can figure out what their response to it is.
Yeah, that's how you consensually go about it. I am smiling because when you talked about shocking people awake, what you did when you said don't be fragile about it is shocking people awake in a way. And I think sometimes we can be a little bit soft on people and be like, oh, they're going through a lot. But your point is exactly right. Hey, don't be fragile. And if you are, that's okay. But you have some work to do. There's some shame in there. Dig in there. I think that's something we shy away from.
Stop handing the responsibility to your partner. Because again, that's you keeping yourself safe and being risk averse. Oh, it's their responsibility to receive this well. Yes, that's part of a relationship, but it's your responsibility to communicate and be honest and give them time to adjust to what you're saying, or give them resources and give them the opportunity to learn or explore or just wrap their mind around it. But unless they know what they're dealing with, that's not a fair fight. Like, it's just not fair. So I think that we're not taught to be courageous in relationships. And ultimately, it takes us losing them sometimes to learn what kind of work we have to do to be more courageous. And some people never do that work. And that's okay. A lot of people don't want to do the work. It's very scary. It's very confronting. And frankly, some people aren't interested. And that's okay. But we're here for the folks who are. And I would say it's a life well lived when you're willing to lean into that space.
Oh, I completely agree. I think that the regrets people end up having are the things they didn't do or the things they didn't say. And so much of the important part of that is saying it honestly and showing up honestly, showing your true self. You mentioned resources, and I want to call out that you provide so many great resources. So if people go to laurenlarusso.com, you have tons of resources available for, I think, every party involved in an affair situation. And I had a look at them earlier. I think that they are a great place for so many people to start. So I would encourage anyone who is in the throes of it, is still healing from it. Like today I learned, wow, a year on, I'm not as okay as I thought I was. And I want to go revisit some of those resources because I think I have some fragility to work on in order to show up in my next relationship fully and trusting. Okay, so I just want to say that you have so many resources, and if anyone is affected by cheating in any way at all, whether you are the affair partner or it's happened to you, honestly, if you're just curious about it, I think it's worth diving into some of these resources. So you can go to laurenlarusso.com and start your journey there.
Thank you for saying that. It's funny how you say even you're thinking about it. That seems weird. What do you mean you're thinking about it? Most people aren't thinking about having an affair. You'd be surprised how many people reach out to me going, I was on the cusp, or I was starting to think, I'm bored. This marriage has been 30 years. Can I do this forever? And I saw your stuff and I realized what I was about to step into, because what I do on Instagram and what I do in my public education work is I basically show people what happens. I show people the things that they would have to actually live into if they did it themselves. And so they're getting that opportunity to see something that come full circle to the beginning of this podcast. people don't talk about and people don't see. So when I give you that window, now you can make some better informed decisions like, wait, I'm going to break my heart later when I have to choose between relationships. Well, I don't know that I want to do that. Or, it's going to cause trauma to my spouse and kids. Let me just pause here. And the work that I do and the education I do is not with any kind of agenda, then presenting what is and allowing people to make decisions for themselves about what that means for them and to them. And I think that's all any of us can do. It's a shame-free space. It's a judgment-free space. And one thing that I'm really proud of that I launched recently are memberships. So there's a betrayed partner membership that's really active. It's a beautiful group of people who are really committed to working through their pain points, understanding themselves better because of what happened, no matter if they're staying together in their relationship or healing alone. That's a hugely supportive community. And then I have a community for folks who are in an affair and they're either trying to end it or trying to decide whether to commit to it or trying to decide what led them to it. All different folks are in there, affair partners and married, unfaithful partners alike, just being honest in that space about their challenges and where they found themselves. And so those are tremendous resources that I'd recommend, and they're on my website as well.
Thank you for mentioning those because I remember seeing that. And one of the things that I think I would really encourage everyone to just go check out your Instagram, because the emotional vulnerability and raw honesty you bring in that 5 years in the future view, you're able to give people of like, if you take one of these options, this is where you may end up. Something that sticks with me, if you are the person having an affair with someone who's married and you're the single party, it's oftentimes they continuously try and stop, but get pulled back into that scenario. And that cycle, it sounds scary. The idea that I'd want to leave and would just keep getting pulled back in. And that content is what spoke to me the most when I saw it, because I'm not in that situation. It hasn't been put in front of me. But the empathy I felt for these people that you work with who are going through this, that's tough, especially
It's so
seeing
hard.
the other partner be married.
Oh, you've bonded to somebody and you have hope for a relationship. That person's not available to you. And then they're on vacation with their family. Or then it's your birthday and you're alone. Or then it's New Year's and they're with their wife at a party or their husband at a party. Whatever the situation is, those early acts of chemistry and connection will bring you there, because it's so easy to feel that spark with somebody or slowly move into that space of connection. Maybe it's a colleague. Maybe it's someone at the gym, someone that you see regularly. Maybe it's someone you just met in the wild and you're like, oh my God, but they're vulnerable in their marriage for whatever reason. And they present as a little bit more available than they really are. And it can lull someone into a sense of like, well, this is temporary until they can address what's going on at home and leave their marriage. So when we put the cart before the horse, unfortunately, there's a lot of heartbreak involved, because that person needs to end their marriage before they can be in a relationship with you. And unfortunately, the affair itself makes that a lot harder than being in isolated pain of relationship loneliness or dysfunction. It tends to stabilize the marriage and make the partner less likely to leave overall, because they're actually getting all of their needs now. And nobody in an affair will admit to that. They'll say, no, this is so painful. But the pain of leaving, the pain of having the hard conversations, the pain of deciding if you're going to end the affair or end your marriage, that's the pain that's being avoided. So the pain of being in the affair is preferable to the pain of actually choosing. So there's a lot of dynamics no one talks about, no one unpacks. And that's what we're here for. And I'm glad you're doing that too, because it's just so necessary.
Cheating is something that does occur in the kink world. And I do work with couples who they have repaired from it. Like often they'll probably go to someone like you, do that repair work. And then when the spouse who had been betrayed is, okay, I'm going to try. Now I understand how important it is to them. Then they come to me. And I wish they had just all come to me first before that cycle of pain and avoidance that is so easy to get sucked into. Like I have zero judgment on it because of that. I'm like, I understand we're avoiding facing ourselves sometimes because that's really hard to do. And
yes, my therapist said early on, change either comes from inspiration or desperation. And in my opinion, change that comes from desperation, that's the most transformative pain. And so there's a reason we find people and people find us in their depths of despair, because we need to be in so much pain to be motivated to find a way out of that pain. Otherwise, the change that comes out of inspiration, that can be really beautiful, but I don't know that it's as visceral. And I think we deal with the visceral stuff.
Definitely not as visceral. It's because when it comes from desperation, it's dirty, it's raw. That when it comes from inspiration, there's a beauty to it because it unfolds in a time that is you're available for, whereas desperation is a push.
Right. Well said.
Lauren, Thank you so much for coming on. This
Of
conversation was even more
course.
than I imagined it could be because it just
Mm,
obviously hit so many levels personally, but
yeah.
also I have the opportunity to work with clients on as well. But
Yeah.
Lauren, thank you for providing the service you do, all of the resources, the amazing free content you're putting out on Instagram. As another content creator, I understand
Mm.
sometimes it's just you are just there. It's a act of love, purely just to
Yeah.
share this information.
100%. Thanks. I'm so glad you found me. It was so nice to talk with you. So
Oh,
I'm here. Now you know. We'll be in touch anytime.
Oh, we'll be doing this again, yeah. And for all the listeners, if you have any questions, comment them below. Lauren, you're definitely coming back on. We have so much more to discuss.
I'd be so glad. Thanks so much, Amanda.
Thank you for being here. It was such a pleasure talking with Lauren LaRusso. This topic hits close to home for so many people, and I'm happy to share her new book, Beyond Infidelity: How to Turn the End of Your Relationship into the Beginning of Your Life, is available for pre-order today. In this book, Lauren helps you stabilize, reclaim your confidence, and rebuild your life from the ground up. If you've ever been through infidelity or love someone who has, this is the book you need to read. Head to the show notes to pre-order your copy of Beyond Infidelity today. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone who might find it interesting. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out. Email info@thekinkconsultant.com. Until next time, keep on kinking on.